So with Daniel Cormier fighting against Stipe Miocic this weekend for the heavyweight title, one of the inevitable questions that's been coming up to him is whether or not this is going to be his last fight, and if not, who would he be willing to fight? And it seems as though the answer to that is the only other person who he would be willing to fight is Jon Jones. One thing before I go into this clip here that I think is kind of interesting is that if you look at the UFC rankings for pound, even though Cormier and Jones have fought 2 times and Jones has won both times, although technically it's 1-0-1 for Jones, Cormier is ranked ahead of Jon Jones. Interesting enough. Anyway, what Cormier has been saying in his interviews is he's perfectly fine with this fight being the last fight in his career. Would he be willing to take a fight with Jon Jones? Yes, but the conditions have to be right for him. It's not something that he feels like he needs to do, but it definitely is something that he's still considering. So I'll just play a clip of him on the Ariel Helwani show and then give my take on whether or not I think this fight makes any sense at all or not.
Where, like, if you do fight him, it'll have to be at 205, or have you sort of bent on that as well?
The fight would be at 205 again. You know, that's one of the prime reasons I would do it, because I would want to try to go and make right what was wrong initially. Maybe if I'm a guy that's going to fight till I was 42 years old, I could fight him at 205, beat him, and then fight him at heavyweight. But it would still be at 205. That's where he beat me at. Another one of my decisions. Right. You know, these decisions aren't his.
Does it bother you when they keep bringing it up, when Dana keeps saying that he wants to see this? Like, does that annoy you?
No, it doesn't annoy me. I think everybody does, though. I mean, I did a first take this morning. The first question was about Jones. I think that our rivalry is so big, it defines our career. You know, for as close as Thiago Santos fought him just recently, people aren't going to remember that fight in the history books. They're going to always go back to the times that him and I have fought, you know, because it just means much more because of the level of mixed martial arts that we show whenever we're in the octagon.
He told me.
All right, so that's his answer right there. So again, it's not like he's committing to taking the fight with Jones necessarily, but it is a thought that's on his mind. So there are 2 ways to look at it. First off, how do I as a fan feel about the idea of a fight between Jones and DC? And then the second question would be, does it even make sense from a promotional standpoint? As a fan, I have no interest in that fight at all, because to me, it doesn't really, like, I don't feel like I gain anything from the end result. Like, yeah, it'll be a cool little lead up to it. You're gonna have 2 guys who don't like each other. Grudge matches are fun. Grudge matches are especially fun ones between 2 elite fighters. But let's just pretend that this fight does happen and Jon Jones wins. Well, cool. Now, instead of being effectively 2-0 in everyone's mind, he is now 3-0 in everyone's mind against DC. So what does that really do for Jones? I mean, I guess if that's Cormier's last fight, then it puts Jones back at the top of the pound-for-pound list. He gets to take whatever shine is left of Daniel Cormier, assuming that, again, this is a fight that would have to happen if Stipe loses this weekend. So we're assuming DC wins for this fight to happen. So then I guess he beats the reigning heavyweight champion, and he can build off of that. So I guess maybe if he wants to use that, he can, but he's had a chance to move up to heavyweight and take a title fight for a while now, and he never has. So I don't know that he'd want to move up to heavyweight after beating DC a third time at 205, especially since a guy who is likely to get the next shot at heavyweight is Francis Ngannou, and it seems like guys like Ngannou are the types of guys who Jones tries to avoid. Not that he wouldn't beat Ngannou in all likelihood, but Ngannou is the type of guy who you'd figure with Jones, from a technical standpoint, he's usually going to outclass most guys. So the type of guy who's going to beat him is probably going to be the guy who lands a lucky shot at him, and who better than Ngannou to do that? So it's a dangerous fight for him. So does Jones gain anything from a win against Cormier? No, not really. If Cormier wins, what does that mean? Well, that means he's 1-2 against Jon Jones. He's probably retiring at that point. So he still is on the bottom end of that little rivalry. I guess you could say it's 1-1-1 because of the no contest, but even at that, even if you honored 1-1-1, they would still have to fight again for someone to come out with more wins than the other. So to me, does DC gain anything in winning? No. I mean, he still has a negative record against Jon Jones. But then in that case, then you have a guy retiring, a double champ retiring, because he would then win the 205 belt again. And what does the UFC do at that point? There's really not much to gain. So while the idea of a grudge match between 2 highly skilled fighters can be nice, I just don't see the positive in whoever ends up winning. I don't see the winner gaining a whole lot, or the promotion really gaining a whole lot as a result. Now, if you are the UFC, with that being said, I made the case for why it doesn't make a whole lot of sense from a promotional standpoint to have that fight. But that being said, if you're going show by show and you're trying to get as many pay-per-views as possible, you would have to think that one fight between Jones and DC is probably going to be worth more in pay-per-views than a couple of fights between Jones and some inflated middleweights like what he's had with Anthony Smith and Thiago Santos. So maybe in that case, you say, hey, from a financial standpoint, we can make a good amount of money on their show. We can do right by ESPN, who's paid for some pay-per-views that haven't sold particularly well, so this can kind of put us back in the green on that. And so for that case, maybe it makes sense. But to me, as a fan, I just don't see a whole lot in this storyline here where it's like with most fights, you want to think about not just what's going to happen on the night of the fight, but then also what's going to happen as a consequence of it. And to me, the consequence of Jones winning really isn't all that interesting to me. The consequence of DC winning isn't really very good because he's looking at retiring anyway. So to me, that's just a fight that doesn't need to happen. But first off, DC is going to have to beat Stipe Miocic. I think he's going to. But if this Jones fight is something that they push for, I mean, I'll watch. But to me, it's just not the most interesting matchup to make, and I'd rather it not happen.